You're very welcome to today's special event for International Women's Day. We're delighted to be partnering with Iconic Offices to bring you this event today. So for those of you who I haven't met, I'm sure I've met some of you, and I'm sure I haven't met a lot of you. My name is Susan Dwyer. I am the founder of Rise Up, and we are a career platform for women. So our mission is really simple. It's to empower and advance more women in their careers and to help companies build more diverse leadership teams. So delighted to be bringing you this event today. And look, in terms of International Women's Day, I'm sure most of us know the essence behind it, and for me, look, every day is about celebrating women, but in particular today, I think it's really nice to come together and celebrate all women from all different types of backgrounds and our achievements and the progress that we've made throughout the years, while also highlighting, the fact that there is still a lot of gender inequality in the world and what we can do to improve and accelerate gender diversity across the world. So today's theme, as Saoirse mentioned, is break the bias. And, bias for me is a funny thing because we all have it, whether we like to admit it or not. It's ingrained in all of us. But I think the theme today and in general is around building the self-awareness around our own biases. And, the topic we chose today is the working parent for a number of different reasons. Like within our community at Rise Up, we have a lot of mothers who are juggling careers and leadership careers, parenthood and life. And I think it's important to share with one another, the good things and the progress, but also, share the challenges and how we can overcome these challenges and what we can do to support one another, which is what today's event is all about. So that's we want this event to be super interactive. So please ask questions throughout the event. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, which we're going to try and get through as many questions as possible. But so that's it from me. And then I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful panelists today. So Karishma, I'm going to start with you because you are first on my screen. So Karishma is a mindset coach who works with senior level working women, or working mothers, should I say, to show up powerfully at work without giving up the balance that is right for their families. Her passion is to put a spotlight on the added value, skills, and growth that comes with being a working mother. Her long-term goal is to change how businesses look at parental leave packages, providing encouragement and support around the return to work, rather than merely the time and space that it takes to be away. And so then we have Sarah Courtney. So Sarah helps make organizations a positive place for parents to thrive and contribute. She does this through maternity and paternity coaching, line manager support, and in-house talks. She is also a coach tutor for the Irish Life Coach Institute. And she's also a mum, a coach, and a champion of supporting parents who want to remain in the workplace. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. We have so many questions to get through, and a lot of questions came in even last night when I put up a suggestion box. So what I'll do is I will kick things off. So Karishma, I'll start off with you. Do you want to tell us a bit about the work that you do and I suppose how you got into that, or a bit about your own story?
Yeah, so well, you've done a wonderful introduction. So first, can I say thank you for having me here today? I absolutely love what you're doing, what we stand for as a group of women together, and the changes we're looking to make. So yeah, I coach new moms returning back to work and working parents in general, but my specialist program is the return back to the workplace after maternity leave. Now, the reason I got into this was you might assume that my first time going back after having a child was not great, but I have two kids, a 9-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. And actually my first time going back was awesome. It was really good. I was so lucky and blessed to have such a wonderful return to work. It was actually the second time around that I found more challenging, where I started a brand new job. I had taken voluntary redundancy, and actually the company didn't intentionally push me out. I don't think, I hope not. But there was an element of treating me differently because I was a working mom. And they did that without understanding what I want and what I need. So while the intention may have been good, the impact wasn't. And it actually showed me, because I got to experience both, that, wow, the culture and the team and how you're brought into the workplace after having that leave is so crucial and critical. And the impact of not having that safe return back to work was a lack of confidence in something that I used to do with my eyes closed. And it transferred into my family life, where I started doubting how good I was as a mom, as a wife, and as every role, really. And so I got into this because I don't want anyone to feel like that. And if I can make a difference to anyone, and had I had someone to coach me back to work at that time, my family, my friends, and myself, we wouldn't have suffered so much, and neither would the workplace have. So I really see the benefit of it because I've experienced the difference, and I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through, and that's why I do
Amazing.
this.
And solving that pain for others. And I know, because we spoke about this the other day, because I want to start off the event by talking about the theme, which is bias and breaking the bias. But can you tell us a little bit about internal bias and what this means, and how you might see it creep up with some of your clients, or maybe even in your own life?
Yeah, so that's actually probably was one of the biggest things that impacted my more challenging return to work the second time around, was the internal bias. And that's why I really like to focus on that, because we talk a lot about other people and their biases in the workplace towards you. But if we're showing up with our own biases against ourselves, that's an even bigger challenge, because no matter what anyone does or how open they are or trying to be supportive, if you're showing up with this fear deep inside, deep rooted, you can't even see that opportunity. And that is something that I see more and more. Like I expected baby brain before I even became a mother. It was just ingrained in me that, oh yeah, that's normal. That's what happens. That's what we go through. And it's not actually, you don't really have to believe that. You can believe something completely different. You can just say, oh, I'm going to refresh these skills, and these are all my new skills. And I was showing up with that fear. The second time, and I projected it. And because I projected it, I wasn't treated with that, oh, she needs help with this, or she needs a bit more assistance in that. And then I thought, why are they helping me extra? Why are they being so extra flexible in a way I'm not even asking for? But I was showing up that way, as if I needed it. So that internal bias of I'm going to struggle is what impacts the confidence. And once that's been shot, that's where your challenges all start creeping up. And that is something I really like to focus on.
Having more, making those assumptions about yourself almost.
Yeah, we're making assumptions about ourselves and how hard it's going to be before we've even tried, because people have told us things are difficult because we've heard challenging stories. But hey, I had a wonderful return. Like, it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we show up makes a really big difference. Of course, the business also and the culture also makes a difference, but you need both.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Sarah, what do you agree with that? Or have you experienced similar experiences with the internal bias? Or can you give us any examples of other biases that parents might face at work, or that you've seen some of your clients face at work, and what can we do to, I guess, push through these biases? Or when we acknowledge that they're happening, is there anything that you advise your clients to do to overcome these challenges or situations?
Yeah. Well, I agree with what Krishna has just shared, and I hear that a lot from my clients in terms of that perception piece, that almost self-fulfilling prophecy of what you expect to happen happens. So we expect mommy guilt, and so it happens. And I have clients saying to me, they feel guilty about not feeling guilty. It's almost like they expected it, and now why am I different that I don't have this? There's loads of bias in the workplace. And you rightly said, Susan, at the start, we are all biased. We have to accept that by virtue of all of our experience to date. We all have biases. It's not a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of and to see how it's influencing our decisions. Parents specifically in the workplace have a number of biases. Some of them are structural, so they're built into the processes of work. So companies perhaps, when they're exiting somebody on maternity leave, they process them as a leaver. So they stop their access to systems. They can't see newsletters or company communications, or they just have these processes that say you're not really part of us now while you're on this time. Or somebody who has a client portfolio comes back after leave and they have no more clients left. They have to start again, even though they might have brought in those clients. So somebody's obviously covered that work in their absence, but how are they re-onboarded so that, if they have billables or if they have targets, that they are protected in some way? Or biases in terms of women maybe working slightly differently when they're back, so reduced hours in some way, but targets not getting adjusted for that. So there's a will for companies to want to do their best for their staff, but not maybe following through on the reality of what that looks like. And because they are structural biases, they are fixable as long as people are willing to say, do you know something, we could just do a little bit better here. And you can often find out if you ask parents who have had whatever type of absence they've had from work, be it a parental leave or extended paternity leave or maternity leave, ask your staff about those experiences so you can understand what the biases might be that you were just doing because that's how we've always done it. But when you know better, you do better.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And is there anything, like, say, for example, you mentioned there an example, and I hear this a lot as well within Rise Up, I've returned to work after maternity leave, and whatever, there's been someone else in the role, and like you mentioned about the clients and starting from scratch, or maybe targets not being readjusted, depending on your new schedule of working less hours. Like, how should someone go about approaching their manager, or like, do you have any practical tips on what's best practice in that situation to do?
Yeah. So remember, these are professional women in professional organizations, and they are highly successful. They have always hit their targets. They have always had good performance reviews. They're no different now that they've had children. So it's not about fighting what you don't want. It's about saying, how do I tee myself up for success? And co-creating that with your manager, with your employer. What does this look like for me as a return so that I am set up for success? So if you need to refresh training, or if you need to readjust targets, or whatever it might be, maybe it's reintroductions to, there's been staff changes in possibly a year out of the workplace, and helping you make those connections. It's about focusing on what you want, clearing that with your manager so you're all on the same page, and then putting the practical steps in place to start making that happen, so that little milestones start getting hit. And so that if your confidence has taken a little bit of a wobble, which for a lot of women that happens, you start seeing progress and focusing on those positive outcomes, and you stop seeing the one meeting you can't go to because you have a crash pickup.
Yeah, that's some really good tips. Thank you for sharing that. And Karishma, I might ask you this one. So the last 2 years, like 2 and a bit, has been, our worlds have been turned upside down in a lot of different ways, and the way we work is no different, and perhaps is one of the biggest impacts. And for working parents in particular, this has changed a lot. The office is now home, and childcare, and everything has become muddled into one almost. And it's funny because I have spoken to some mothers and parents and caregivers who have, really struggled, and, they've really found it challenging. And then I've spoken to other mothers who have been like, it's great, I'm able to work at my career, but also I've never been more present in my family life. So I'm interested to see, what trends have you seen with your clients around, this whole shift to working from home, and how has it impacted parents, both, good and bad?
Yeah. So let's start with the good. So the good thing is, of course, there's that opportunity to be more present. And I would like to highlight that over the pandemic, what's been wonderful is more and more fathers have also got a taste of what it feels like to spend that extra bit of time with your children. And they like it. So this is, I think, has supported even women, and it supports men in doing what they also want to do. Like they're allowed to want to be at home. They're allowed to want to be more present. So the great thing is that shift in, it's almost created an opportunity for more equality because we got a taste of how great it is. And it's also wonderful because, to be honest, like I save so much time on travel and on all those little things. Like they're a massive, massive bonus for us. And some of the challenges are also that, people have burnout. They're still logging in at crazy hours and they don't necessarily switch off when their children are home. That's also something that happens. And I like to talk about burnout kind of like overload, where you're trying to do too many things at the same time. And the challenge there is we're not always listening to our body. So like a tip that I would give out is, really listen to your body when have this whole working from home opportunity. Use it in a way that benefits you and you could show up powerfully at work and at home. And that comes from one, listening to your body, two, understanding that balance for you is not necessarily balance for someone else. And every day the balance can look different. And that's okay. That is how it works. Like there will be a project that's really important. So you're going to log in or you're going to turn the TV on while you're finishing up, whatever it is. And there'll be other times your child needs you. And that moment, they need you more than an email that needs to be sent out. And so some days you'll maybe focus more on work and some days you might focus more on your children. And it doesn't mean that one is more of a priority or another. There's a difference between focus and priority. And I think understanding that makes working from home a lot easier. And then creating these boundaries, like before I go pick up my children, I try and have 10, 15, 20 minutes to myself where maybe I do a walk around the school or I walk to the school. But yeah, that is the type of thing that gives you like that break to switch off. And there will be times that I'm on a phone call until I pick them up, until my son comes out the school gates. And I physically feel the overload. So I'm getting better at it. I'm working on it. So really noticing what works for you and what doesn't when you're working from home, and knowing that your working from home will not always look like someone else's, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you touched on something there which I just want to hone in on. Because I've heard a lot of mothers say over the last however long that, they worry about their performance being judged because they're caring for their children or they're not physically in the office. And, I've heard a lot of people say, I feel like I need to always be on to prove that, I'm working, I'm available, I'm not slacking or whatever it is. It's this like fear or I need to be visible or available all the time. And Sarah, what would you say to these parents that are experiencing these worries?
Mhm. And doesn't that go back to that sense of internal bias, the story that you're telling yourself, that if I do something, you're projecting yourself into imagining what somebody else is going to think, and you cannot possibly know what somebody else is going to think. Somebody who's feeling high self-worth, confident in their contribution, is not going to worry about that because they're focused on their outcomes. They're focused on the work that they are delivering, the connections they make, the business they bring in, whatever it might be in their role. Somebody who is worrying about perception is struggling with their confidence. So I would be careful to focus on what's the underlying challenge rather than the symptom as such. So if you're worried about perception and you bring that back to low confidence, what can you do to grow your confidence? What can you notice about yourself that you are achieving well? Where are the little wins that can happen at work? You're not an island. If you're working in a business, there are people around you to support you. How can those people help you? How can you find a mentor or an ally or a manager who's going to be supportive or a peer who's going through the same stuff? so that you're not on your own. But it's so important to question, is the story I'm telling myself serving me? Is this helping me towards my goal of work-life balance or a successful return to work or whatever it might be? Or is it taking away? Because you're in charge of those thoughts. You're in charge of what story you tell yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And you mentioned work-life balance there, which is on my list in terms of questions. Is this obviously well, this is a topic that comes up a lot within our network, but is this something a lot of your clients really struggle with? And like, how do you help, or what guidance do you share with people who seriously struggle with work-life balance and juggling not just parenthood and work, but like personal life as well?
It's elusive, isn't it? And it shows up because we call it different things now. We're saying work-life harmony. We find other language to try and make it clearer for ourselves. What I notice about most of us, and I include myself in that, is, you tend to know when you're off balance, and you tend to have language around that and overwhelm, and you're against the clock and you're up against it. That comes very naturally. When you ask somebody what their ideal balance would look like, they often struggle. They often struggle to actually articulate, well, what would it be? How would I know if I felt balanced? So I would always start with, what's the goal with this? What would it look like? How would you feel? And are your actions bringing you towards that? So if work-life balance for you is, I feel calm at the end of the day, are the actions in that day supporting that goal? Are you taking breaks? Are you just working through lunch all the time? And is that bringing you to calm, or is that bringing you to overwhelm? It's some really practical stuff. And people say they don't have time to take a break, or if I work through lunch, I get to finish earlier. And I think 9 times out of 10, that doesn't work. But our brains need rest breaks to perform. Just like little babies need daytime sleep to sleep at night, adult brains need break time to perform well. That's why the self-care industry explodes, because it's based in science that you actually have to take breaks. You have to go outside. Your brain needs time to rest so it can perform at its best. And people who have a brain that's performing optimally tend to have better balance. And when you are giving yourself those breaks, you tend to get a little bit more creative with your solutions, and things just flows better. The non-stop go, go, go does lead to at least overwhelm, and possibly to something more serious like burnout.
Yeah, and I think that's so relatable to not just working parents, but
Absolutely.
anyone, because burnout affects all of us, at different times in our life. And I know for me, even recently, I've started just to have hours where I don't look at my emails and literally just have thinking time. And I'm so much better for it, like productivity, creativity. So yeah, I can definitely relate to what you just said. And Karishma, I might ask you this, but do you have any advice for working mums or parents who are working from home and find it really hard to differentiate, boundaries are being crossed between work and personal life? Does that come up a lot with your clients? And do you have any advice to, I guess, to help create those barriers?
I think the biggest piece of advice would be where I mentioned about having that little bit of break before. Okay, so I guess it's a bit different based on the age group of the children. So where they're even younger and their hours are longer at nursery or school, whatever it is, before picking them up, to have a gap. So you really feel like you've gone to work and you've left work almost. So your brain knows, okay, now I've switched off from work. So having key things that you do and actions that are indicators of kind of not necessarily switching off completely, because it is very difficult, but where you're putting your spotlight next. It's the same as when you drive away from your office and you come home. So even after dropping your kids to school, to do a walk around your block or whatever it is, something that is you going to work or leaving work, is something that I say is quite important. And another thing is, we tend to do everything is pressure. So what does my work need from me? What does my child need from me? What does my home need from me? And it's always giving. A lot of the, not always, it's often just giving, giving, giving. So when you're working from home and you hear the laundry machine go off, or you see the sink is getting full of dishes, you start thinking of the things that feed you and the things that drain you. So a big tip is, how many things do you do in the day that are draining your energy? And how many things are you doing that are feeding it? Because it's really important to make sure that we are replenishing the energy that we're using. So if all we're doing is giving, 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 it's hard. So any of us can do that. Write down all the things that feel good, even if it's a phone call to your friend for 5 minutes or whatever it is, and really filling yourself with the things that give you energy when you're working from home. Because if you get lost in just, I have to finish all of this and I have to be at school picked up by this, it's not necessarily going to be you working at your best. And we want to see you working at your best.
Thank you for sharing that. And I would love to know from both of you what you hear from your clients on this, but in terms of like what working parents actually want, like what would be an ideal situation for them? For me, like in our network, you know, the number one thing that comes up is job flexibility, like, and whether that means, you know, starting later in the morning or whatever, just around time, or actually things like job sharing or flexible roles, which a lot of companies, you know, don't offer. Like Sarah, is there anything that constantly comes up again that, you know, not just mothers but parents would find really helpful, or, you know, what support?
The top two every time: flexible hours, flexible location, every time. Probably third is a supportive manager. So we can have some great companies, but managers manage differently in different teams. And so the practical experience of returning to a manager who has open communication, who doesn't see you as any less, like we're talking about bias today, and that sort of maternal bias creeping in of, you know, maybe you're different now in some way now that you're back, and different in a bad way, not a good way. But the top two every single time are: let us work flexibly in flexible locations so that we can be successful. Not that it's a boundary for an obstacle, it's a boundary to allow them to be successful. That, you know, if something happens, and like Krishna was saying there about, you know, however old your kids are, you know, if somebody's off school sick, but they're of an age where they're okay to be, you know, playing quietly and you can get some work done, why would that not be the smart thing to do? It's just to treat people like responsible adults who want to have successful careers, and they need the tools to be able to do that. And in terms of bias showing up, and we're going to see what happens now as people do return to offices or start this hybrid piece of, our manager is going to favor the people who are physically in the office more than those who are not. And we know probably it will be the mothers who are less in the office. Now, I hope there is going to be more of a balance, because I do agree that more men are seeing, and more non-parents are seeing, just another way of doing things. So I do hope that across the board, employees will all want to work flexibly, and it won't be the burden of mothers to carry this, and they have let it to date, to find this flexible way of working. But I do think that's another avenue where bias can creep in terms of when we hit this hybrid piece. How will businesses react to that in terms of who gets what work, who gets what project, who gets what promotion?
And so do you think, like, the pandemic and everything that's happened, has that amplified bias, do you think? Or
No, I think people are diverse and mixed, and people have had all sorts of different experience. And it's really important not to label us all as, you know, mums or dads or parents or not parents. I think smart employers who want successful businesses are happy to talk to their staff, and just to be, I guess, vulnerable enough or humble enough to acknowledge that bias exists. And things have moved on drastically in the last 2 years, and some of it has been really tough. and some advantages have come from it. And in a sense, maybe level fields are being playing fields are being leveled a little bit, maybe. I think it's just, don't make assumptions. Talk to your staff and find out what they think and what would work best for them. Don't put a policy in place without understanding is that actually fixing what we're trying to fix here.
Yeah, and you made a good point there around what can managers do, because the reality is your manager mightn't be a parent, they mightn't understand what it is that you're going through, or the demands. And Karishma, do you have any advice, like, for any managers on the call who might be looking to be that more supportive person? Like, what does good management look like in with regards to this topic, or what can they do to support their team more?
I think it's really all about listening, and I'm not just like really hearing what people are trying to say to you, because, and I just want to echo something that Sarah said, and I'll come back to your question and tie it together, but she mentioned about it's not just parents and moms or whatnot that want this flexibility. There are more people out there who want this flexibility. I speak to people who don't have children, but their walk with their pup twice a day changes how they perform at work, because they get out, they feed themselves in that way. And I think that's really important, that giving the people the space to do what they need to perform at their best. And so I just want to echo that, because what Sarah said there is really crucial. And then this then ties back to managers who, yes, working parents, but everybody. Like, there are people who have performed better than ever during the pandemic when they found this new balance, and really understanding what do they need, how do they work best, because forcing someone to create a balance, which is not a balance for them at all, it's what you think it should be, is more likely to demotivate people. And understanding where someone needs support, because while someone may need support with the hours they do, other people might need support with the types of projects they take on or how much they travel, and really knowing what this person needs. And I think it's best explained if I use my own example from when I had a more troublesome return to work, where I wanted to do certain projects and whatnot, but they were taken away from me because, like, oh, but that will be too highly pressured for you potentially. But travel 6 hours going to this meeting and that meeting. I'm like, well, no, actually, I can log in to this meeting from after getting my kids, but I really want to be on that project. And I wasn't getting what I needed out of the role because they weren't hearing what I needed. And then that affected my performance and how I showed up in the areas they wanted me to perform in. And I don't know if that helps or that answers your question, but it's about really understanding what that individual needs to be their best and really contribute to your business.
Yeah, and that's a really good example that you just shared. Like, what did you do in that situation? Because I'm sure there's lots of people who are in similar situations, or have been, or will be in the future. Is there anything that worked, or anything that you would do differently if you were to be in that situation again?
To be honest, I did what I would recommend anyone else did. And I spoke about it, and I had a meeting, and I said, listen, I'm telling you what I need, and it's impacting me massively. I want to be in this project. I don't feel valued anymore. I don't feel seen. And it's really important that you understand what I need to be okay on this team. And I was very honest about it. It wasn't easy to have the conversation, but it was worth it, because when the response wasn't what I wanted it to be, I knew it wasn't the place for me. But had I not had the conversation, I would have been stuck there longer and actually probably gone into some form of like a deeper depression had I not spoken about it, seen that this isn't going to happen. They're not going to hear me. I need to leave.
Thank you for sharing that. And another thing that I want to touch on, and Sarah, I know I've actually spoken to you about this before, I think. But say, for example, someone going on maternity leave for the first time. It's all new, it's new territory. They've never been out of work for this amount of time before. And then that transitions into, okay, it's coming close to the return to work. Do you have any tips on how to make that transition successfully, and what that might look like in terms of check-ins previously, or just kind of making yourself visible or known that you're coming back. How do you advise your clients around this?
Oh yeah, I mean, so much. Firstly, I'd say imagine what if you were talking to yourself or a friend in a year's time and you said, I had a really good experience. The departure was good, the return was good, and it was good for these reasons because I got this stuff done, I felt like this. And I would fill in the blanks and I would work back from there. So imagine how you want to feel when you're logging off for the last time. If there's women on this call who are maybe pregnant at the moment and their maternity leave is pending, imagine how you want to feel. What would you like to get done in that time? If you have the energy and the appetite to get something chunky under your belt, like some training or some interesting project, what would that be and how can you make that happen? If you want to work with certain people in your business and get access to certain leaders, like how could you work with them in that time? So I would say just imagine and envision for yourself what it is you want it to be and work back. And remember, and we've talked a lot about people managers so far, and I want to say, like, well done to them in the last couple of years for handling things as they have handled it, because it's been a really hard ask of people managers who are often parents as well. They have a layered set of challenges. But talk to your manager, because managers don't always know how to handle it, and they could do with some guidance there of, look, what would work for you? What would you like to get done before you start to leave? What would you like your return to look like? How can I be of help to you? So don't make assumptions for yourself that you have to write off, the time while you're pregnant at work, as sort of just clicking down the calendar until you leave. That you could use that time, if that feels right for you, to keep building that CV and your experience, and to be sowing the seeds of what your return will look like. A lot of my clients are focused on promotion when they want to come back. Now, it's not for everybody, and there's no pressure on that in that sense, but a lot of them do want to keep going. So what would you be doing this side of your maternity leave to make that promotion more likely? And happily, there's lots of people who are having really positive returns. They're getting promoted while they're on maternity leave. They're coming back into really exciting opportunities and supportive opportunities. There's loads of good stuff happening. But I think the starting point for me is imagine, tell me what a great return would look like for you, and start getting practical and work back from there. And finally, I know that's a long answer, but especially for women who are about to wrap up, they're so conscientious. They're so like trying to cross every T and dot every I, have the perfect handover. I would say stand back a little from that if you can. What's important to you? What conversations would you be having with who? How are you building your reputation and your sort of the PR of your job, rather than maybe doing the actual job right up to the very last minute. Maybe somebody's going to be taking over, and maybe they can start doing that slightly earlier than you expect of yourself. And babies come when they come. So I was emailing people from Hollis Street, let me tell you, and saying, I won't be attending the school because this baby has decided to come. And that's the reality of it. But start early. So as soon as you know you're pregnant, start from there and start planning ahead.
Thank you. There's some great wisdom in there. And Krishna, do you have anything to add there? Because I know it's a pretty big question.
Yeah, I echo what Sarah said, and she said it beautifully. And the one thing I would just put even more of a spotlight on is where she mentioned the feelings, and it's really all about how you feel and what feels right, what feels good, what feels like it's going to put you in the direction you want to go in. Because if it doesn't feel good, if you want to get here, then what feels like it's going to take you there? If you keep doing things that are forcing you that way, you're never going to experience what you have in your mind. And so really just following that feeling, because our feelings determine our thoughts, and those thoughts lead to various actions. So what feels good, just follow it. I absolutely love what Sarah said there.
And what about, because I know you both work with employers in terms of ensuring, I suppose, a smooth transition back to work. Like, what are you seeing employers do really well in this space and that other companies could start replicating? And, are there, or on the flip side, is there any kind of mistakes that you see companies make which results in loss of talent? Because the reality is, I know within our network, companies do tend to experience a permanent drop off of talent at this level of women, typically between the ages of 29 and 40. When women start to have babies and look after elderly parents or whatever it may be, but general life happens. Yeah, so is there anything that you see companies do well or not so well that we could learn from? Krishma, I'll ask you, and then Sarah maybe.
Yeah, so I think that the companies I work with, I think the teams are also really important. So yes, the good thing is making sure that you've discussed ahead of time how they want their leave to look like, because some women want to be contacted and be told about opportunities and prearranged kit days and whatnot. And other people don't want any emails and don't want to see anything. So the good thing is having the conversation where, like, from beforehand of how they want the leave part to look like. I think that's really important, because a negative or bad thing I've seen is where, based on the first few handful of women who've come back and what they wanted, the assumption was that all the other moms would want that. And that's not always the case. There are some women who want to be contacted during their leave. There are. And there are others who are like, nope, I don't want to hear anything. And so just really understanding what they need from you, I think, is really important. That's a good thing that businesses can do. Another thing is having the support in place for when they come back in terms of the teams that they're going to be working on. So depending on the industry that you're in, people get moved or have new clients who they've never met before. So it's even that much more difficult to build a relationship. So, having that conversation, like, are you open to joining a new team, or do you want the exact same team, exact same clients, or what can we do? How can we meet in the middle to ensure comfort during that period of transition? So I think the best thing companies can do is have that open communication and not assume that the problem comes when businesses assume what the woman's going to want. Again, going back to biases and what they're used to and the trends they've seen. So just having that open communication makes a massive difference.
Brilliant. And Sarah, would you add anything there?
I think that open communication is speaking to culture and what culture you have in your teams or across your whole organization. And remember, there are other colleagues watching, and they're looking ahead to see what people maybe slightly down the road, a little bit further, are experiencing, how they're being treated, what those people are saying about their career opportunities in this company, what that working life looks like now that they have parents. And they're just quietly watching and seeing, is this a place that I can do this? And is what I see appealing? So I think there's so much opportunity for companies to manage inclusively in a way that retains their staff and retains people who are happy and performing. So I would just add that it's a sort of a bigger picture piece. And I know we're talking about parents, but it's the culture in the team of how people are treated, how communication happens, and that it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, and actually I read an article recently, I don't know if you saw it, but it was around maternity leave and how it can make you a better leader. Like, I know some companies look at it as like, oh, this is a bad thing, we're going to be losing someone for X amount of months, but actually it can really develop a person's skills, and having that time out, and your responsibilities growing in all different kind of areas can make you so much stronger for when you return. And because something I want to mention is that, so my background is in recruitment, worked in recruitment for years. And one thing that I was thinking yesterday, okay, what are the biases that I witness in recruitment? And one thing is that actually maternal bias exists way before we start having children. And I know, like, so many more of my female candidates than not used to all take off their engagement rings before they went into interviews. And it's just interesting because you think in this day and age that, like, we have to be past that surely. But, the reality is that, and these biases are unconscious, right? So it's not like people are consciously, but it is there. So it's just interesting that, like, how do we eliminate this bias? Like, what can we do? um and I don't know if you've any tips around eliminating those biases, either of you.
Uh, well, just in terms of what I see, um, with women coming back, and they don't often see it themselves all the time, but what I see is resilience, maturity. I see them cutting out the noise. I just think I mean, the word inspirational is overused, but they are. That is incredible what, um, women who have had children are still delivering at work. I think it's incredible. And they're certainly the kind of people I would want on my team. So I think they are an absolute talent and they are the future of businesses. I mean, we know at this stage that diverse workforces are more productive, more profitable. So these are people that you want to keep. I would just say that as a starting point, that I think women come back personally, but better than ever.
Yeah, I would love to add to that, Sarah, that
Yeah.
you are like spot on there. The women, after they've gone off on maternity leave, you have learned so much more. And we know the best leaders have empathy and great communication. And those are the regular things we talk about in terms of skills that, women learn when they're off on maternity leave. But what we don't focus on is some bigger things like laser focused action. That's what leaders need. When your child falls off a climbing frame, you don't start telling them off for falling off the climbing frame or what were they doing so high up or why were they not careful. What we do is we first attend to the problem. We make sure they're okay. We address any injuries, and then you can work backwards in terms of safety and whatnot. That laser focus action, women don't realize or see how they can apply that in the workforce. Like when something goes wrong, a project is challenging, we are able to have laser focus action on fixing the problem, attending the issue before working backwards. So there's these skills that you would never think, how does that transfer to the workplace? But it does. And we don't see it because we have this bias of, oh, no, children are a burden. People see children as a burden, but actually they're our biggest lessons in life. Like employers should be thankful that they are getting constant learning for the rest of their life after they're a parent. And you're not even having to worry about putting them through courses. They are learning it on their own in real time.
And let's remember that there's nothing like having a little person to make you realize you need to financially support them. So you are very focused on making sure that this career does not stagnate. There's a bottom line there as well, and that's the reality. And women don't always talk about the financial elements of their careers, and that is also a motivator. I think it's any absence from a workplace is a useful absence because the lens is refreshed. So whether you took a sabbatical, you went traveling, I was speaking to a dad recently who took 6 months paternity, it's just revolutionized his outlook. I think absence and breaks from what you do every day is always going to be a positive. And if I was hiring, that's something that I would see as a plus. And I think you've seen maybe on LinkedIn recently, they've just added a section, I think, where you can account for whatever the absence is, because people are realizing I have to explain this in some way. I don't think you should ever have to justify taking a maternity leave. It's a drop in the ocean of a career. In terms of our internal biases, let's not tell ourselves that it's a big deal. It's a few months, once, twice, 3 times, maybe 4, but it doesn't go on forever. So I think get the perspective back,
Yeah, and I really like the idea of highlighting to people, like when you, in an interview, if you're looking for a job after a career break, to talk about the skills from maybe previous roles, but also the skills you picked up in your career break, whatever it was, like, because you definitely picked up skills. And it's about not having the bias that the break meant I didn't use my brain, that I didn't learn anything. We are constantly learning as humans. Tap into it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with that more around whether it be sabbaticals, Sarah, like you said, or career breaks. And working in recruitment, like, I don't know, I saw a lot of people like literally finishing a job on Friday, starting a new job on Monday because of that fear that I can't have that gap in my CV. Like, employers are going to see me or they're going to judge whatever. But I think that's changing. Like, I really do. And I think, like employers, and I know certain employers offer like sabbaticals now and things now, which I think is great, because I think you're right. Like, by removing yourself from your day to day and stepping off the hamster wheel and actually focusing on new experiences or traveling or whatever it may be, raising kids, you learn, like whatever first time experience is, you learn so much and you can bring that back to the workplace. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And one question that's just come in there is from someone who is currently on maternity leave, and their priorities have shifted, and their motivations have shifted perhaps, and now they're looking at changing career and maybe not going back to the same employer. So my question, Karishma, do you see this a lot? And do you have any advice for someone in this situation?
Yeah, so first, it's okay. I think that's really important to just start with. It's okay. It's okay that your motivations have shifted and you want to do something different, because that's you finding your balance. And the hardest part for moms is to give yourself permission to be different sometimes, or for things to change. And just really listening to what I think my biggest advice would be, to find out what ideal for you would look like, what balance for you would look like, and then looking for a role in line with that. So is the question about like, how do you find a new job? Is that what it is? Or is it more in terms of how do you deal with the change of motivation?
I think it was more around the change of motivation and kind of how to figure that out, what that means for your next career.
I think all it means is that you're growing and you're changing and developing. And I would just start with, take some time to sit with the fact that it's okay, and then take it from there. And because that's the hardest part. Don't be in a rush to find that new passion, because you might jump into something you don't like. And actually, an exercise I would recommend is filling out what feeds you, what feels good, and what drains you, because you'll get an idea of the type of role that you want to move into, and then seeing how you would feel if you had a lot more of energy feeding rather than energy draining. That is something I would recommend you do.
And it's probably a great time to reassess values if needed, or and figure out what they look like, and what that might transfer into new skills or new career opportunities, etc. There's something I've learned recently, is that like as humans, we're constantly reinventing ourselves. And I think for a long time, or when people spend years studying for a certain degree or whatever it may be, working towards something, that they feel like, no, these are my skills, this is my career. But something that I've learned from being in the US, particularly for the last couple of months, is that people change careers, and I mean completely change careers all of the time. And like, that is a part of life. That's a part of evolving as human beings and learning and growing. And I think, we need to embrace that more and not shy away from it or be ashamed of wanting to change. Like, I think it's totally normal and we should all be doing it way more.
Yeah.
Susan, oh, sorry, Krishna.
No, go ahead, Sarah.
I switched from HR to coaching after my first daughter. And I remember thinking, I have to start again from scratch. And then as I progressed with it, I realized, no, my whole first career was a huge part. in my second career. So for this question, and this lady asking this question, you know, she'll bring a lot of what she's already done to whatever is next for her, and to really think, you know, do the wish list. What would it look like? You know, if I could, like, don't worry about the obstacles yet. Try and just imagine what it would be, and go in that vein. But there's so much that you've already learned, be it practical skills, competence, behavioral, you know, skills. You will bring that all into the next career path. And I think a lot of people are, you know, maybe post-pandemic, or maybe a transition like maternity, they're thinking, look, what's next? And that's a positive thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I love that. And to wrap things up, because I just looked at the clock, it were 3 minutes to go, but is there anything, any like kind of last note that you would like to leave us on, particularly say speaking to working parents who, I don't know, I'm imagining some people might have signed on because maybe they're struggling with burnout or stress or managing or juggling, or the return to the office is coming soon. What does that look like? Is there, Sarah, is there anything, parting wisdom that you'd like to share with the group, or any tips for someone who might be struggling right now? You know, what would you say to them?
Yeah, if anyone's worrying about something, action is the only solution to worry. So you can sit around in your head and worry, but action will short circuit that. But don't be afraid to create the life you want. It doesn't have to be something you read online. It doesn't have to be something your mom did or your sister did or your friend did. Don't be afraid to trust yourself, to know what will make you happy, and to go after that. You have every permission to do that.
I love that. And Karishma?
I think the main thing I would say is to just accept, acknowledge, and know that balance shifts every day. Your best changes every day, and to just give yourself permission to allow that, because the pressure that working parents put on themselves to always perform at a certain level is a lot, and that is what leads to this overwhelm and burnout. So just letting your balance shift with your day.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, thank you so much to both of you for your time and for sharing your personal experiences and also professional. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone so much for joining as well. We will be sharing around the recording for anyone who wants to catch up, or for anyone who wasn't able to make it. And thank you to Iconic Offices for organizing today.